You're listening to the Becoming More Me podcast with me, Theresa Lear Levine. You're already enough, but if you're anything like me, you thrive when you're stretching, creating, and aligning with the person you feel called to be, and creating greater calm, clarity, and confidence in your life, as well as room for pleasure and expansion. Through amazing stories, conversations, and offerings, this podcast is here to inspire and support you. Get ready to release the negative, reinforce the positive, and elevate our consciousness and vibe together as we tap into our limitless potential to transform and grow. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Becoming More Me. I've got a fun treat for you today. Dr. Melissa Corley-Carter, the barefoot dancing rocket scientist, is here to chat. And yes, she actually is a rocket scientist. She's also a 7-continent marathoner, speaker, award-winning author, and certified professional coach who helps rock star humans to turn setbacks into success, reclaim their power, and own their awesomeness by applying the essence of rocket science to their own lives. I can't wait to hear about that. When her 20-year dream to become an astronaut was shattered, Melissa continued externally on the proverbial fast track of an Air Force career, but internally, she was adrift. She'd wrapped up so much of her identity in becoming an astronaut that she didn't know who she would be or what she'd do without it. She could have followed in the footsteps of the high-powered and inspiring women she worked for, but she realized she wanted to inspire people in a different way and with a lot more life balance. When she came to a major decision point, she leapt into the unknown and left her active duty military career. In the years since, she's forged her own path. Her journey has taught her that identity and goals are not synonymous, that even major disappointments hold gifts beyond imagining, and that every experience invites us to take a small step or a giant leap into greater alignment with who we really are. Melissa is also the author and photographer of the award-winning 2021 coffee table book, Running the World: Marathon Memoirs from the 7 Continents. In her book, she shares her outer journey across the continents and her inner journey of recovering from shattered dreams and realigning her life with powerful purpose. An inspirational force of nature, Melissa's here to celebrate the power of who you are and fire you up with passion for the life you live. And I'm excited to celebrate you, Melissa, and all this brought you to this place and time today. So welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Theresa, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here and chat with you too.
Yeah, so let's dive in with just a little bit of who you are, where you live, what you do, the people you spend your time with, and maybe some hobbies that we don't know anything about.
Yep. So I live in Virginia, outside the DC area, a little town called Dumfries. Probably haven't heard of it, but it's.
I have, because I'm just outside of DC in Davidsonville, Maryland. So we're like less than an hour from each other.
There we go. Oh my gosh, what a small, we could have done this in person.
We could have. That would have been fun. Anyway, so you're in Dumfries.
I am. Yep. So actually, one of my favorite things to do, a side note, I'm looking out my window right now. One of my favorite things to do is actually watch the seasons happen. So it's bright green outside. It's been raining today, so it's a little dark outside, but we've just had sort of the red buds and the cherry blossoms and everything.
Red buds are my favorite.
I
intentionally scheduled my family photo shoot while the ones in our yard were blooming, because I was like, those things just light me up every year.
Me too. So yes, I've just been playing with some photos from the season this year. So yes, I absolutely love just photographing seasons and just progression, any kind of form of progression, like little baby birds growing up and just things like that.
Springtime. Really There's nothing like that, like fresh spring green, especially when you're driving through foresty areas and you start seeing it pop up on the floor of the forest. And I just love that. And yes, we're experiencing the same weather. It's that rainy kind of, but it really brings out the green and everything pops when the rain comes in the springtime. So you have a great hobby for photography. and obviously very good at it. So seasons are fun to capture with that.
They are.
And
They
who are the main people in your life that you spend time with?
Well, I spend a lot of time with my husband, and I've got two twin stepdaughters as well. They're in college right now. So I also spend a lot of time with my own twin sister. I was most of the time I spend with her is on Zoom because she doesn't live here. But actually, I have a really close knit group of high school friends also that I see on Zoom almost every week. Yeah, so a
Wow.
lot of just really good friends from across the ages. So I do kind of spend a lot of Zoom time connecting with people, but it is actually, we had started that. Our little high school group had started that before the pandemic. So we were kind of ahead of the game on the whole virtual connection thing. And I was really starting to realize that for a long time, I think I was sort of anti virtual connection. It should be face to face. But as you are, I'm sure are well aware in this area, it's hard to, there's traffic and
Yeah.
people live in 360 directions, and it is really challenging to actually come together in person. And quite honestly, a lot of my friends don't live here. So it has been really learning how to communicate in all the ways that we have available to us. And I
Yeah.
think gratefully, I think one of the benefits of the pandemic was learning how productive virtual connection can also be. So it's a little bit a side rant there, but most of the people I spend time with are not necessarily local, I'll say.
Yeah. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Dallas, Texas. So
Okay. So is that
mhm.
where high school friends and things were?
That's where they were, yes, but now we're scattered. Actually,
Everyone's all over the place
one of my
now.
friends actually does live in Herndon, so we actually do get together in person quite a bit,
Nice.
relatively, I guess. And then I have a friend who just moved to Philadelphia from Washington State, and got some in California. My sister lives in Phoenix, so we're kind of all over the place. So, yeah, but it's fun.
Yeah. So at what age did the urge to want to become an astronaut emerge for you?
Pretty young. I was in fifth grade. So I was
Okay.
I was in fifth grade, and an astronaut came and talked to my class. And I actually, the funny thing is I don't actually remember this. I don't remember the astronaut coming and talking, but my mom told me that, I came home and I was just over the moon, literally, so to speak, and just was hooked and decided I wanted to be an astronaut and never looked back. So while I don't remember that actual time, I did get to meet that particular astronaut two more times later. Once when I was in eighth grade, or maybe I think it was high school robotics competition, and he was at the competition being one of the judges, I think. And then actually when I was in my PhD program, he, I think, had been also a graduate of my school. And we had a big sort of astronaut gathering there were a lot of astronaut alumni from the school, and they came back, and I got to meet him again, and I told him this story, and then I made him feel old. So I was like, hi, you came and talked to my class when I was in fifth grade. Nobody likes hearing that. So
That's
but
fun.
yeah, so it was cool. And so it did for 20 years, went down that path, and was, really into it on the path. And it turned out actually that I along the way I also got corrective eye surgery because I had always had really bad eyesight. And it turned out that my pre-LASIK eyesight was so bad that I was disqualified anyway. So
Yeah. Is
uh,
that kind of like, and I know you were in the Air Force also. So is that like a prerequisite for astronauts that you have to have like really great eyesight to begin with?
Yes. So they have eyesight standards, and it doesn't have to be 20/20. It has to be correctable to 20/20. But I found out later that there was some fine print somewhere that basically said if your refractive error had ever been, more than -8, kind of don't bother. And I actually, you know what? I was actually really glad that I had not found that fine print, because there was like kind of 3-year gap. So I had wanted to be an astronaut for 20 years, but there was this 3-year period where I actually thought it was possible because I had gotten the eye surgery. And I decided it was so important for me to have believed it was possible. Like, I was kind of sort of had the idea and trusted that eventually they would allow eye surgery, but I knew for a long time that my current eyesight was disqualifying. I was just not concerned about it. But in the period where it was no longer disqualifying, I thought, I really was in that space of absolutely knowing it was possible. And I think that was really important.
Yeah, belief is incredibly powerful. But it was kind of
Mm-hmm.
funny. My son's homesick today. He's
Mm-hmm.
13. So we were chatting a little bit before I came in here, and I'm telling him,
Yeah.
I'm getting ready to, interview. And I was giving some of these different statistics about you and all these different things. Wow. Like he's like, I bet you've never talked to anybody quite like that before. And I'm like, she does have a really interesting set of, characteristics. I'm really looking forward to this. And he goes, well, why didn't you become an astronaut? And he and I both have like awful vision. And and I was like, I think it had something to do with her vision not qualifying. And he
Mm-hmm.
goes, you have like perfect vision to do that. He's like, there goes that dream. But he was being totally sarcastic. I'm
Right.
like, I don't think it was actually your dream because I think knowing him, he would have already researched and known that was a disqualifying factor. But he's like, I guess I'm just going to have to wait until I can just go up into space like a recreational person does.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
I'm like,
That's
it's
too funny.
coming. It's already here. So like, just start saving up, buddy. Like you can
Yeah.
go. So that's too
That's
funny.
cute.
Do you
That's
do
cute.
you ever did you ever go to school as like a rocket scientist and do presentations for people?
No, I didn't actually, but I have actually done. I for a while when I actually first moved here, I've lived here a couple times. I lived in Chantilly for a while too, and when I first moved to Chantilly, it was I think 2010. It was actually fresh out of my PhD program, and I actually went to the Dulles Air and Space Museum before my furniture had even arrived. I asked how I could volunteer, and so I actually became a Discovery Station volunteer, which you can kind of go in on the weekends, and I did the spacesuit, so I'd show the spacesuit, and the little kids got to try on the gloves and the boots and all that. So got to talk about those kinds of things a lot, and that was really fun for sure. And I've actually, speaking of schools, I have actually gone back and helped kids at my school do different kind of science projects and things like that. And so, yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, I know I had a cousin who did a lot of the work on the Hubble telescopes and
Oh,
things, and
cool.
she
Mhm.
also had wanted to be an astronaut, but was disqualified for other reasons. And
Mhm.
um, she loved going into the schools and like doing
Mhm.
different experiments that showed the kids stuff and being able
Mhm.
to like inspire the next generation. And you mentioned robotics too.
Mhm.
Did you do first robotics?
I did when it was brand new. Yes. Did you do first?
No, but my older son is a senior in high school and he just completed his second year of it. They actually went to Worlds last year, which was
Oh, so
like I did a
cool.
whole podcast episode on it because it was so inspiring to me and I
Awesome.
loved like just the little bit that I was mentoring was just it changed my life. So,
Mhm.
and I was so excited when, Disney put out their documentary on it last year and that was amazing and he's had such a great experience in that program and it's
Mhm.
blown my mind what those kids do. So, I didn't even know it
It's
existed. I think it might not have when I was in high school. I don't know. Was
No,
it late
it was
90s?
just I graduated high school in 99 and it was still kind of new. So I think when I
Yeah.
my freshman or sophomore year in high school was the first
Yeah,
time
I
that
just
we did.
missed it. I graduated in 96. So,
Okay, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I
It was
didn't know
just
anything
getting
about it
started.
until my son told me about it a few years ago. And then it was like this whole world opened up, which is great because I've got four boys. They're all very like STEMmy. So, we're finding
Awesome.
all the different divisions that are, coming up for the younger ones to do and everything else, which is
It's
great.
awesome.
I love it. So
Yes.
then what was the astronaut dream what led you to pursue being a rocket scientist?
Yes. So that was all part of the path along the way. So it was the basically the PhD in astronautical engineering and learning. I actually also did work on satellite programs and satellite acquisitions and things like that. So it was interesting, sort of like these were the some steps, and then incidentally I didn't really have like a backup Air Force plan, so I kind of assumed that eventually I would find my way to NASA, and there I would be, and didn't have a backup plan. So as then at that point, actually, I like you were saying at the beginning, I did sort of drift after without having the astronaut dream anymore, and I didn't necessarily know what to do with my Air Force career. But actually, right about that time, I had just taken or been assigned in a new position as the aide de camp to a general officer. So you don't really have a lot of time to think about yourself when you're aide de camping, and so my life revolved around my general, and so I think that was really good too because I was able to kind of process in the background, and I didn't really have time to dwell on oh poor me. I did my fair share of that outside, but I also had a lot of work to do, so that was helpful, I think, along the way as well.
That's awesome. Were there any like favorite things that you got to do while you had the like privilege of doing your work as a rocket scientist?
Well, I did get to, I mean, I worked on some things that went into space, and I think even starting in college, I went to Stanford and we had a little spacecraft design lab, and we were back when, I mean, CubeSats are kind of ubiquitous now. Everybody sends up CubeSats, so they're little, 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter cube things, and then that was also just beginning. And Stanford and Cal Poly San Luis Obispo had developed this little CubeSat launcher thing that would go on a bigger satellite and kind of pew pew pew, like kind of spew them out, and so we were there in the beginning stages of that. My professor there had been one of the first people to conceive of the CubeSat idea. So it was kind of cool just being there at the beginning of several stages that are again now ubiquitous and everybody does it. I was like, I was there when that was sort of like first, like that was just getting started, and now I'm the one starting to feel old. But but yeah, so knowing that, even if they were small, that there are things up there that have been up there that I've worked on and gotten to play with and learn about, has been super rewarding for sure.
Yeah. So then when did like the running and the marathons come into play? Have you always enjoyed running or
So actually not. That was kind of a crazy one too. I was on the seventh grade track team. That was my only really official running experience, and I was not very fast. I was in the tryouts actually. I was the last person to finish the mile, and kind of one of my big funny stories about that is I did hurdles, and in one of the track meets, I'm running and the girl next to me tripped and fell over her hurdle. And I stopped to ask if she was okay. Because so competitive spirit, not really my thing. I was like, oh no, I mean, how do you just keep going? She just fell. So
I probably would have done the same thing.
one of my best friends, she has her daughter is running track right now. She's like 8 or 10, I think she's probably 10. But they do the kids when they do the same thing. Somebody trips and falls down and everybody kind of stops, and I think that's not a bad thing.
No, and they're like the moments that bring me to absolute tears in like the Olympic Games and things when people
Oh,
actually do that or they
yes,
like carry each other across the finish line. I'll like tear up
yes.
just
Oh
talking
my
about it. It's
God.
just like
I
that's the stuff
know.
that gets me every time. Like,
Yes,
oh,
absolutely.
thank God humans
Absolutely.
are not actually pretty awesome sometimes, you know?
Yes, yes, they really are. Oh my
I
gosh, I
love
love that.
anything that gives me more and more proof of that.
Mm. Yes, I totally agree. I totally agree. So yeah, so I was actually not that big into running. I started running when I joined the Air Force. So in ROTC we ran a lot, obviously, and you actually
Which
take
can
an
make a
annual.
lot of people dislike it.
Yes,
Which
that's true.
I guess kind
That's
of the
true.
reason I was asking. I was like, did it
Yeah,
pique your
I don't
interest?
so
Or
I never really loved it, but I also didn't hate it. I just, I did it, and that's what you did. And we had an annual physical fitness test, so you run for that. But it was actually in my first Air Force assignment that a friend of mine got me into more distance running. She was a really good distance runner. She ran marathons, and I was in Albuquerque, New Mexico at the time, and we would run on the trails around work, and started to get a little bit more into it. And so I had been getting better. I had been doing a little bit. I had run my first 8 miles, and my mom told me that there was a marathon in Big Sur, California, which was a place that I absolutely loved. We had gone there for family vacations before, and I was like, oh, well, gosh, I mean, being able to run on Highway 1 through Big Sur, that would be really cool. And so that sort of sparked the train for a marathon. So it was September at the time, and the marathon was in April. So I thought, sure, I could train for a marathon. Never really occurred to me to do that, but I will. And so I did. And then actually at the expo for the marathon, I found out the Seven Continents Club. And this was all in 2007. So this was like a long time ago. Well, a relatively long time ago. So at the expo, the Seven Continents Club was there, and that was this group of people that runs marathons on all 7 continents. And it was this idea that, I mean, I was like, wow, that's amazing. I didn't even know people could do that. But once I got hold of this idea, I couldn't look back. I just couldn't imagine knowing that was a thing and then not doing it. So I was like, yes, of course I will do that. Even though Antarctica, I mean, that sounds kind of crazy, but yes, let's do it. So
was it like what was the craziest of the? Were there 7 marathons or were there more?
well, I've done 10 total.
Okay.
I ended up doing Big Sur twice because I did it that first year. That was my first marathon. And then I actually was in Monterey at the Naval Postgraduate School, which is right there by Big Sur. So I actually did it that year, the following year as well, and trained on the course, and actually did much, even I cut an hour off my time the second year that I did it. It was really cool. So then yes, then the other two that were not, I ran the Marine Corps Marathon as well, and then the Bataan Memorial Death March at White Sands Missile Range. So the rest of them were all the intercontinental ones. So yes. So then um yeah, it was, sorry, let me just pause real quick. What was the question? I just got all wrapped
No
up in what I
problem.
was
We're gonna have
saying.
an ADHD moment. We're used to those on this show. I think the question was like, what was the craziest one?
Oh, craziest. There we go.
I think so. If I'm
Yes,
remembering correctly, that's what
that
I'm
was
curious
indeed the
about.
question. Yes, yes. So Antarctica, yes, was crazy just logistically. Like we went to Argentina and we went to Buenos Aires for a couple of days, and then we were down in Ushuaia at the tip of Tierra del Fuego down south. And then we took a ship across the Drake Passage to the Antarctic Peninsula, and we ran on King George Island in the peninsula, which is a place where there's a lot of different international bases. So we actually ran kind of from Russia to Chile to China to Uruguay, and I
Wow.
mean, and ran lots of laps too. But I sometimes, feel a little sheepish admitting that it was 40 degrees, but it was also 40-mile-an-hour wind, and it was raining, and it was muddy, and it was rocky, and I was covered in mud by the end. It definitely felt like I had run in Antarctica, and so that was super crazy. But I think the one that was actually physically and mentally the hardest for me was the Great Wall. And so that was the Great Wall of China, and it was lots and lots of steps, probably 5,000 something steps. I think the whole thing was not on the wall, but enough parts of it were to be very intense. And it was also very hot and humid, and there were lots of extenuating circumstances. I had actually not run in 6 weeks because I thought my foot was injured, and I didn't know how I was going to get through the marathon. But when we got there, we had to actually hike the wall section, so we knew what we were getting ourselves into. And somehow magically my foot was fine after we did that, and I was like, oh, maybe I should incorporate more hiking into my training. But in any case, but then also my GPS watch was dead, and I am not very fast. I run, walk. So I'll typically, what I was doing at the time in my training was always, running for 5 minutes and walking for a minute. And my watch would beep and tell me when I was supposed to run and walk. And then my watch was dead. I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? And this woman who was on my trip, who was an Iron woman, I mean, she had completed an Ironman race. She actually volunteered to run with me and pace me. She was in way better shape than I was. She could have gone so much faster than I did, but she ran with me and paced me for the first 21 miles. And you had to get to 21 miles. This is another one of your
Yes.
humans are amazing moments.
I feel the tears building up.
Yes. So you had to get to 21 miles by a certain time so that you didn't get taken off the course. And we made it by that time. And then she was, of course, feeling great because she had gone so slowly with me. And so she took off and ran at her own pace. And I kind of plodded along and actually came across someone else from our group who had just given up. But he was just sitting on the steps, and he's like, I'm done. They can pick me up tomorrow.
Oh.
And so I sat down with him and was like, I mean, I'm not going to leave him here. And so we chatted for a little bit, and I told him that I had been kind of walking up a few steps at a time, and maybe it was like, well, how about if we just walk up 10 steps and sit down? And he says, yeah, I think I could do that. So we walk 10 steps and we sit down, and then we walk up 10 more and sit down. And we did this over and over again, and some sections of 5 steps, and eventually got off the wall and ended up crossing the finish line. He holds out his hand, and we cross the finish line hand in hand with
Oh.
7 minutes to spare on an 8-hour time limit. So
Uh,
yeah,
that sounds delightful.
yes.
And also grueling.
Yes, definitely grueling, but I would say definitely the most human camaraderie, human, compassion, just warm fuzzies about the human race, kind of experience. So it was so rewarding.
Yeah.
So while it seems it was the hardest, it was the longest, and emotionally just felt the most I don't want to use the word fulfilling, because they were all, I mean, they're all my favorite for something different, but that was definitely my favorite for the teamwork aspect for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. So now that you're kind of like on the other side of that goal and on the other side of the astronaut dream that didn't quite work out the way that you originally envisioned, what does
Mhm.
the coaching and the work that you do now look like?
Yes. So it's really fascinating to me how nothing is ever wasted, and everything has a purpose. For a little bit, I kind of stewed in the what was this rocket science thing for in the first place if I'm not going to use it, and all the engineering degrees and this, that, and the other thing.
Right.
And in fact, I am using it because I have distilled what rocket science is really about, and I apply it to my coaching. And then I'm just going to put a pin in. I'm going to say something else about the astronaut thing, but rocket science itself is really about, in essence, it's about 3 things: going from where you are to where you want to be. It's about acknowledging progress and adjusting course, and it's about letting go to lift off. And that is really what we do in coaching, as you know. And so really, what I learned from rocket science helps me every step of the way in coaching and helps me communicate in a fun and unique way, how to actually get through life like a rocket scientist, and not just get through it, but to thrive through it. So yeah. And I think also that the astronaut thing, where that has really crystallized for me into how I also work with clients, is asking what is the goal behind the goal. And I think it took me years to kind of get to this process, but thinking, okay, if you want to be an astronaut and that's your goal, there's only one way to do that, and that's to become an astronaut. And if
Right.
that doesn't succeed, then are we going to call that failure? I mean, I actually don't believe in failure. I think life is an experiment and you can't fail, you can only learn. But when I asked myself, what did I really want in becoming an astronaut? I realized that I think I always had this sense of spiritual connection with the universe. And I wanted to inspire people to greatness the way astronauts had always inspired me. And then I was enthralled by the kind of the vision of a unified and harmonious world. And which astronauts, they go up into space and they look down and they say you can't see any borders, and it's just the big blue marble, and let's take care of it together, and all this. And so I think when I was in fifth grade and that astronaut came and talked to my class, I wasn't necessarily verbalizing all of these things, but I think they were there, and astronaut seemed like some kind of tangible way to make that happen. So I think the goal behind the goal is that critical piece of saying, oh, there's only kind of one, well, now there's kind of more, but ways to become an astronaut, but there are infinite ways to achieve inspiring people and unified and harmonious world and spiritual connection with the universe. I do all of those things every single day. So I am actually living my astronaut dream every day. And so
Absolutely. Kind of
yeah.
shifted the vision a little bit. Very
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
And, I always am grateful to have authors on the show because I am authoring my first book right now.
Yes,
So thank
congratulations.
you. Yes, very excited. And it feels like, as soon as I made the commitment earlier this year and, started working with somebody with deadlines and all that kind of accountability that's been missing for me for so long, all these authors started being like magnetized into my show or into my life or into all these different other places. So it's been really cool. Do you have any, I don't know, favorite tips or takeaways for writing or things that you really enjoyed or disliked or anything about the process?
Yes, yes, I love this question. I think actually one of the coolest things I experienced during the writing process was really letting the book create itself through me. I think I had actually been kind of beating my head against a wall, wanting to write a book about leadership, and I thought everyone and their dog has written a book about leadership. What am I going to write about? What am I going to say it's any different? And I at this one point was like, I don't know what I have. Like, what am I doing with my life? What is my purpose? What am I doing? And literally like 10 or 20 minutes later, coffee table book about the marathons. I already had all these pictures. They made photo albums, and friends had said, if that whole science thing doesn't work out, at least you have a backup plan. You have a great photographic eye and all this. And like, wow, 10 years ago, I should have listened then. But in any case, everything happens at the perfect time, I think. And so this was a complete shift away from what I was doing, but it was so uniquely me. And then every time along the way, when I was maybe a little bit stuck, or how does this story play out, I actually learned to just sort of start asking questions. All right, what goes here? And ideas would land. And so it was actually a huge experience of not forcing it, but letting it literally just create itself. So I don't know if you've experienced that as you've been writing.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I have. And also, I just love putting those kind of questions out there to the universe on a regular basis. It's,
Oh yes, me too.
instead of like affirming something is already done, I often like to ask, what would it take to fill in the blank? And just allow my subconscious brain to deliver me those answers while I
Yes,
sleep or whatever
yes,
else. And it
100%.
just makes everything flow so much easier. So I definitely
Yes.
appreciate that. And I'll be using a lot of what would it take over the next
Yeah.
few months so that I can allow my big thing was like, I want to do this with ease, with joy,
Mhm.
and with pleasure, because
Yeah.
that way all of that is infused into the work and palpable by the
Mhm.
readers who I want to be developing their calm, clarity, and confidence through that lens and
Yes, I
experience that
love
way.
it. Yes,
So,
yes. All words I love. Phenomenal.
and
Yay. I wish you so much luck, and
thank
not
you.
then luck, but just wishing you magic. because
Thanks.
it is a magical process, and the ease and the flow, if you let them, will just carry you through. So
Yeah, and I'm just
even
welcoming
even
the
when it's hard.
transformation. Yeah, the transformation that I know it's going to bring in me,
Mhm.
just from like birthing it out into the world and accomplishing
Yes.
it.
Yes.
Much probably I've never run a marathon, but I'm just going to compare it because
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure
Absolutely.
it's nothing like it. And maybe someday I'll do that, but they're daunting
It's
to me.
kind of
I don't know.
it's a big goal, and you take it step by step, and eventually you cross the finish line. So it's quite exactly like a marathon, actually.
Yes, I do. I have accomplished a lot of big goals in that step by step, one bite at a time sort of philosophy. So, yeah,
Yes.
exactly. And, I'm just starting to wrap my head around the depth of like human design and things. And I noticed when I
Mhm.
was doing some research on you that that's like an area that you have some focus on. And
Yes.
can you fill us in on what quantum human design is and how it's different from other forms of human design?
Yes, yes. Quantum human design and traditional human design are kind of the two main categories. And quantum human design is a newer version. It's actually so my mentor Karen Curry Parker studied with Ra, who kind of channeled the human design systems, traditional human design, and
Mhm.
traditional human design was basically designed to be kind of a wake up call to kind of shock people into they're a little bit more of an awakened state, and so some of the language is a little bit in your face, challenging, and quantum human design actually adds a kind of a higher vibrational, more uplifting language to it. So it's aligning you to literally a higher frequency, and just with, because language is frequency, and we actually, this is, I mean, not even human design related, but also ingrained. We the language we use actually affects our brains, and
Absolutely.
if we use victim language and can't and I can't and this and that and the other, it's literally kind of killing brain cells, and if we use powerful language like I choose to, and I'm going to, and I get to, and changing our perspective makes new neural connections and pathways and things. And so anyway, quantum human design is a language that is calls us even higher into vibrational and alignment with who we really are. So it is really beautiful, and it really, when I discovered it, and sort of the sister practice quantum alignment system, which it also incorporates emotional freedom techniques, they literally felt like coming home, like language that my soul has always spoken, and I just absolutely love them. And so it's really really amazing. I've done Myers-Briggs, I've done lots of different kind of personality assessments, been
Yeah.
certified in a lot of personality assessments, and honestly, quantum human design seems to kind of bring them all, and be even more deep and accurate than any others that I have used, and it's really just amazing and profound.
That's awesome. And I love the quote that you had on your site from Karen Curry Parker that we are designed to feel good being who we are and doing what we came here to do. Couldn't agree with that more.
Yes.
And that's why I wanted to just ask and get some clarification because I'm
Mhm.
sure that my listeners are also curious and interested in that as well. So,
Yes.
as we wrap up here, what are some ways that people can get in touch with you, work with you? What kind of things are you offering right now? Fill us in on all
Yeah.
that good stuff.
Absolutely. Well, you can always go to my website, which is epiclifeactually.com, as in your epic life actually is rocket science.
Mhm.
And I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn as at Melissa Corley Carter. And what I'm doing at the moment, I have a couple of one-on-one options. One small step and giant leap. And one small step is just a 3-session kind of introductory coaching series where we actually do human design. We'll do your quantum human design and also energy leadership, which is another modality I incorporate into that. Quantum human design kind of shows archetypal energies and their high and low expressions, and energy leadership is actually a practical framework for kind of refining the spectrum of the energy in between. So okay, what does this kind of, what does this situation look like from, for example, 7 different perspectives, and you get to choose which perspective you actually want to see it from. So it's really powerful, and helping you really reclaim your own power to choose your response to any circumstance,
I love
and really remind you that you have that power in every situation. So we do that, and then we'll probably do a little bit of emotional freedom techniques and tapping and all that as well. So just let's get through. Have all these tools and resources that you can start to apply in your everyday life. And then Giant Leap is 6 months of one-on-one coaching. So we'll that's your foundation, and then we just coach and do whatever it is that you want to work on, and come out with just profound shifts at the end of it. So those are the one-on-one options I have. And then actually also weekly, I am doing a little card draw. With Running the World, my book, I'm working on a companion card deck where I've taken a bunch of pictures from the book and actually written little messages about them. And I'm going to make them a little wisdom card deck. And so I've been they're in PowerPoint right now, but basically going to turn into a card deck later in the year.
Yes.
And every week I'm drawing one out and doing a little video. So it's on social media and in my email list and everything. So my website is the place to go, and follow me on social media. And then, if you want to sign up to do some one-on-one work, I would love to do that as well.
Yes, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing all of those offerings with us, Melissa. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in and listening today. This was so much fun. I'm so glad that we were able to come together for this conversation.
Me too. Thank you so much, Theresa. I appreciate it.
Take care. Thanks for spending some of your precious time with me today. If you loved this episode, please leave a review or simply share it with someone else who would get great benefit from it too. If you share on social media, please tag me so I can personally connect and thank you. Until next time, keep taking bold and brave steps towards becoming more of who you want to be in this world. You are capable, you are worthy, and you are enough. And if your inner critic is still trying to argue with those facts, hit me up. We've got work to do.